The second I stepped into that exclusive Billionaires club, the whole room went dead quiet, and then came the laughter.
She must be in the wrong place.
They looked me up and down, whispering that a black woman like me had no business being somewhere reserved for the rich and powerful. One billionaire even smirked and told security to keep an eye on me before I embarrassed myself. I just stood there smiling while they cracked jokes at my expense, because I was sitting on a secret that was fixing to change everything. The moment I pulled out those ownership papers, their laughter dried up, their faces went ghost white, and the entire room froze dead in its tracks. If you've ever been underestimated because of how you look, this one right here is for you. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell, because today I'm telling y'all how I turned their mockery into my moment of triumph. Trust me, you do not want to miss this. Let me tell you about the day I walked into the most exclusive country club in the city and watched a whole room full of billionaires eat every single word they said. My name is Keisha, and this is the story of how I went from being the butt of the joke to holding all the cards. Growing up, my mama always told me, baby, you gotta work twice as hard just to get half as much. She was talking about being black in America, and Lord knows she wasn't lying. I learned that lesson early, being the only black kid in my advanced math classes, watching teachers look downright shocked that I could speak proper English, dealing with guidance counselors who tried to steer me toward more realistic goals. But I had dreams way bigger than their little expectations. While other kids were hanging out after school, I was down at the local grocery store, saving every single penny for college. My mama was working 2 jobs just to keep food on the table, so I knew college was on me and me alone. I studied hard, worked even harder, and somehow made it through with a degree in computer science and business. After graduation, I started small, real small. I had this tiny apartment where I ran my tech consulting business right off my kitchen table. Clients would call, and I'd be pretending I was sitting in some fancy office building instead of right next to my microwave. But I was good at what I did, really, truly good. I understood technology in a way that helped businesses grow, and slowly but surely word got around. 10 years later, I had built something I was genuinely proud of. My company, Tech Solutions Plus, had grown from that kitchen table operation into a team of 15 brilliant people. We specialized in helping struggling companies flip their technology problems into competitive advantages. We weren't the biggest firm in the city, but we had a reputation. We got results when nobody else could. That's exactly how I ended up on Robert Sterling's radar. Sterling was one of those tech billionaires you see splashed across magazine covers. Built his empire back in the early days of social media, but like a lot of old-school tech guys, he'd gotten comfortable and stopped innovating. His company, Sterling Industries, was hemorrhaging money because they couldn't keep up with a market that had moved on without them. When his board recommended my firm, I could hear the reluctance plain as day in his voice on that first phone call. He kept asking about my team, fishing around to see if there was some white male CEO he could talk to instead. But our results spoke louder than his prejudices, and after 6 months of completely overhauling their systems, Sterling Industries was profitable again. More profitable than they'd ever been, actually. We didn't just patch their problems, we positioned them to dominate their market for the next decade. Robert Sterling went from nearly losing everything he'd built to being richer than ever. And me, well, that's where this story gets real interesting. The invitation showed up on a Tuesday, heavy cardstock, gold lettering, the whole 9 yards. Mr. Robert Sterling cordially invites you to an exclusive networking evening at Riverside Country Club. I stared at that invitation for a good long while, knowing full well what I was walking into. Riverside Country Club was the kind of place where memberships cost more than most folks' houses, and the waiting list was longer than my arm. Old money, white money, the kind of place where people like me were usually only seen carrying trays or cleaning tables. I almost didn't go. I had a comfortable life, good clients who respected me, and honestly, I was flat out tired of being the only black face in a room full of people looking at me like I was lost. But this wasn't just any networking event. This was where the real decisions got made in the city, where contracts worth millions got hashed out over whiskey and cigars. So I decided to go, but not for the reasons you might think. The night of the event, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror longer than usual. I went with a classic black business suit, professional, not flashy, pearl earrings my grandmother had left me, hair pulled back neat in a bun. I looked successful without being threatening, which is a calculation every professional black woman knows by heart. Before I walked out, I made sure my briefcase was squared away. Business cards, a portfolio of our recent wins, and tucked safely in the side pocket, some very important documents that I hoped I wouldn't need, but brought along just in case. The drive to Riverside Country Club took me straight through the wealthiest part of the city. Massive houses hidden behind iron gates, lawns so perfectly trimmed they looked fake, and that kind of quiet that only comes with serious money. When I pulled up to the club's circular driveway, I took a deep breath and reminded myself exactly why I was there. The building looked like something straight out of a movie. Massive stone columns, marble steps, valet attendants in white jackets who looked like they'd walked right out of the 1950s. The young man who took my keys did a double take when I handed them over, not hostile, just surprised. I was used to it. Inside was even more intimidating. Crystal chandeliers hanging from coffered ceilings, oil paintings of old white men in hunting gear lining every wall, carpet so thick you couldn't hear your own footsteps. Everything in that place was designed to remind you it was built for important people, and the message was crystal clear. If you had to wonder whether you belonged, you probably didn't. The networking event was in the main ballroom, and I could already hear the buzz of conversation and clinking glasses before I even pushed through the doors. When I walked in, it was like one of those movie scenes where the record scratches and everybody turns to stare. Conversations didn't stop altogether, they just got quieter and a whole lot more pointed. I spotted Robert Sterling right away. He was holding court in the center of the room, surrounded by his usual circle of wealthy friends. I recognized some of them from business magazines and society pages. James Patterson, the CEO of a major software company, Patricia Wells, who owned half the commercial real estate downtown, David Chen, an investment banker who moved more money in a month than most people see in a lifetime. As I walked toward their group, I could feel eyes following me from around the room. The whispers kicked up almost immediately. Who invited her? Is she with the catering company? She must be somebody's assistant. I'd heard it all before, but it still stung. I squared my shoulders and walked straight toward Sterling's group with my head held high. "Good evening, Mr. Sterling," I said, extending my hand. "Keisha Williams from Tech Solutions Plus. Thank you for the invitation." Robert Sterling looked at me like he was trying to figure out who I was, even though we'd been working together for months. The pause stretched just long enough to be uncomfortable before he shook my hand with all the enthusiasm of somebody touching a dead fish. "Oh, right. The consultant," and just like that, he turned back to his friends without bothering to introduce me to a single soul. I stood there for a moment, waiting to be brought into the conversation. That wasn't happening. James Patterson was in the middle of some story about his yacht, and they all acted like I was invisible. That's when things got real ugly. "Excuse me, miss," James said, turning to me with a condescending smile. "Could you get me another scotch? Make it a double." The group chuckled, and I felt my face flush with anger and embarrassment both at once. "I'm not wait staff," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "I'm here as a guest." "Oh," Patricia Wells said, her voice dripping with fake surprise. "How interesting. And what is it that you do, dear?" The way she said dear made it real clear she thought I was anything but. I explained that I ran a technology consulting firm, that we'd recently worked with Sterling Industries, but I could see the skepticism written all over their faces. "Technology consulting," David Chen repeated slowly, like he was tasting the words. "How fascinating. I'm sure there's a real need for diversity in that field." The way he said diversity made it sound like something he'd stepped in. The others nodded along knowingly, and I realized they'd already decided exactly who I was and why I was there. "I'm sure you work very hard," Patricia added with that polished fake smile wealthy white women perfect in finishing school. "It must be so rewarding helping your community with their computer problems." My community, like I only worked with Black folks. Like my expertise was somehow capped by the color of my skin. I felt that familiar fire rising in my chest, the same anger I'd felt 1,000 times when people tried to stuff me into a box marked less than. But I kept my voice steady. "Actually, we work with clients across all industries. In fact, we recently helped Sterling Industries increase their quarterly profits by 340%. Robert Sterling looked uncomfortable. He knew exactly how much money my company had made him, but acknowledging that in front of his friends would mean admitting he'd needed saving by someone they clearly saw as beneath them. "That's wonderful," James said in a tone that made clear he didn't believe a word of it. "I'm sure you played a very supportive role in that success." Supportive, like I was some kind of assistant instead of the architect of their whole comeback. The conversation kept going, but now they were talking about me like I wasn't even standing right there. James wondered out loud how urban businesses managed to land contracts with established companies. Patricia suggested maybe there were diversity requirements that forced companies to hire firms like mine. David threw out something about affirmative action in consulting, and they all had themselves a real good laugh. I stood there and listened to them pick apart my success and chalk it up to everything except my actual ability. Other guests had started noticing the spectacle by then, and I could feel more eyes drifting our way. Some looked sympathetic, most just seemed curious about the drama unfolding. You know, Patricia said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear, I think it's just wonderful when people from disadvantaged backgrounds get opportunities to network with successful professionals. It's so important to give back. Give back, like I was some charity case instead of a successful business owner who'd built something from nothing with her own two hands. That's when James decided to really twist the knife. Actually, I think there might be some confusion here, he said, looking around the group with theatrical concern. This event is for business owners and executives only. Are you sure you're in the right place? The implication was loud and clear. They didn't believe I could possibly belong in their world. They were flat out suggesting I'd snuck in somewhere I didn't belong. Maybe we should call security, David said, not even trying to hide his smirk. Just to make sure there hasn't been some kind of mistake. And that's when something inside me snapped, not into anger, but into a cold, calculated calm. I'd been in situations like this my whole entire life, and I'd learned that sometimes the best move is to let people hang themselves with their own rope. You know what? I said, my voice perfectly even. I think there has been a misunderstanding. I opened my briefcase and pulled out a leather folder with some very important documents inside. They watched with curious expressions as I carefully took out the papers. 6 months ago, I began, Sterling Industries was 3 weeks away from bankruptcy. The board was in a flat-out panic, investors were pulling out, and Robert here was staring down the barrel of losing everything he'd ever built. Robert Sterling's face went pale. He knew exactly where this was headed. My company didn't just consult on their technology problems, I continued, holding up the first document. We completely redesigned their entire digital infrastructure, created brand new revenue streams, and set them up to dominate their market for the next decade. I could see the smug look starting to crack. The turnaround was so successful that I was offered equity in the company as part of our compensation package. I held up the second document, but Robert needed cash flow more than he needed to hold onto all his shares. The room had gone completely quiet. Even conversations at other tables had died down as people sensed something big was going down. So 3 months ago, when Robert came to me looking for a private investor to buy out some of his partners, I made him an offer. I pulled out the final document, the one that was about to change everything. These are the ownership papers showing my 51% controlling stake in Sterling Industries. You could have heard a pin drop. James Patterson's jaw literally fell open. Patricia Wells looked like she'd been slapped clean across the face. David Chen stared at those documents like he expected them to burst into flames. And Robert Sterling, he looked like he wanted to sink straight through the floor. That's impossible, Patricia whispered. Actually, it's not only possible, it's legal and binding, I replied, holding up the notarized documents. Robert, you want to go ahead and confirm that for your friends? All eyes swung to Robert Sterling, and for just a second I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. He opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again like a fish gasping for air. It's true, he finally managed. Keisha owns controlling interest in my company. The silence that followed was absolutely deafening. I could see the wheels turning in their heads as the full weight of what that meant started sinking in. The woman they'd been clowning on, the person they'd suggested didn't belong in their world, was now, technically, their boss's boss. So when y'all were cracking jokes about diversity hires and affirmative action, I said, my voice still calm but with a sharp edge underneath, you were talking about the person who literally owns the company that writes Robert's checks. James was the first one to try to recover. I think there might have been some misunderstanding. Oh, there was definitely a misunderstanding. I cut him off. You misunderstood me for somebody you could dismiss and disrespect. You misunderstood my success as some kind of handout instead of the result of real work and real brilliance. You misunderstood this evening as your chance to put me in my place. I looked each of them dead in the eye one by one, but here's what y'all didn't understand. You didn't understand that while you were busy inheriting your wealth and coasting on your connections, I was out here building something real. You didn't understand that respect isn't about the color of your skin or the size of your trust fund. And you definitely didn't understand that the woman you were trying to humiliate just became one of the most powerful people in this room. Patricia tried to backtrack. I think there might have been a miscommunication. There was no miscommunication, I said firmly. I heard every word. So did everyone else standing in this room. You showed me exactly who you are the moment you thought I was powerless to do a single thing about it. David Chen, clearly panicking about his business ties to Sterling Industries, jumped in. I hope you know we have nothing but respect for successful business people, regardless of their background. Their background? I repeated. You mean my background of working 3 jobs to put myself through college? My background of building a successful company from absolutely nothing. My background of saving your friend's business when his own poor decisions nearly destroyed it. The crowd around us had grown as word spread through the room. I could see people pulling out their phones, already posting, already filming. In the age of viral videos, this was about to go very public very fast. Now, I continued, let's talk about what happens next. As the majority owner of Sterling Industries, I'll be taking a much more active role in company operations. That includes a full review of every single business partnership and consulting relationship we have. The color drained out of James's face as the reality hit him. His company almost certainly did business with Sterling Industries. I'll also be rolling out some new policies around corporate culture and professional conduct. Because if this is how y'all treat people when you think they can't fight back, I can only imagine how you treat your own employees. Robert Sterling finally found his voice again. Keisha, I hope we can discuss this privately. Oh, we will absolutely be having some private conversations, I told him, but right now I need everybody here to understand something real clear. I looked around the room, making sure I had every last person's attention. Success doesn't care about your race, your gender, or your family connections. Success cares about results. And while y'all were busy playing country club politics and looking down on people you thought were beneath you, I was busy building an empire. I carefully tucked the documents back into my briefcase and snapped it shut with a satisfying click. The next time you see somebody in a room like this who doesn't look like you, maybe stop and consider they might not be lost. Maybe they're exactly where they're supposed to be, maybe they've earned every right to be standing right there. I turned to leave, then paused and looked back at the group one last time. Oh, and James. Next time you want a drink, flag down one of the actual wait staff. I'm sure they'd be more than happy to help you out. As I walked toward the exit, the crowd parted like the Red Sea. I could hear the whispers firing up behind me, and I knew this story would be all over the business community by morning. Some folks would frame it as a feel-good story about overcoming prejudice. Others would zero in on the business angle, analyzing how a consulting firm had managed to acquire controlling interest in a major corporation. But for me, it was simpler than all that. It was about dignity. It was about refusing to let other people's limitations define what's possible for you. It was about the moment when the so-called underdog reveals they were never the underdog at all. My phone started buzzing before I even made it to my car. Word travels fast in business circles, and apparently videos of the whole confrontation were already making the rounds on social media. By the time I got home, I had 17 missed calls from reporters and 43 text messages from colleagues who'd heard different versions of what went down. The next morning, Sterling Industries stock jumped 12% on news of the ownership change. Investors saw my takeover as a real positive sign for the company's future. 3 business magazines wanted to interview me, and 2 documentary filmmakers reached out about telling my story. But the call that hit the hardest came from my mama. "Baby," she said, her voice full of so much pride, "I saw that video online. You remember what I always told you about working twice as hard?" "Yes, Mama, I remember." "Well, looks like all that hard work is finally paying off. And you did it with class, baby. You could have torn them down, but you just showed them who you really are." That's the thing about success. It's not just about the money or the power or getting recognized. It's about the moment you realize that every person who tried to make you feel small was really just showing you how small they were. 6 months later, Sterling Industries had tripled in value under my leadership. We'd scooped up 2 competitors and launched 3 brand new product lines. The business magazines that had looked right through me for years were now calling me a visionary. James Patterson's company lost their contract with us, along with several other major accounts once word got around about how he treated people. Patricia Wells tried to schedule a lunch to discuss potential opportunities, but my assistant let her know my calendar was booked out through 2027. And David Chen? He sent a fruit basket with a note apologizing for any misunderstandings. I donated the fruit to a local food bank and tossed the note in the trash. Robert Sterling and I eventually built a solid working relationship, though it took him some time to get used to having a boss. To his credit, he learned from that night and became a genuinely better leader because of it. But the real victory wasn't in the business wins or the media coverage or even the satisfaction of proving them wrong. The real victory was in flat-out refusing to accept their definition of who I was supposed to be. Every time a young Black woman tells me she saw that video and decided to start her own business, every time someone thanks me for showing them they belong in rooms where they're the only one who looks like them, every time someone chooses dignity over acceptance, that's when I know that night at Riverside Country Club was worth every single uncomfortable moment. Because at the end of the day, success isn't just about what you achieve, It's about who you become in the process of achieving it. And sometimes, the best way to prove you belong somewhere is to go ahead and buy the whole damn place. If this story inspired you, smash that like button and share it with somebody who needs to hear this. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming adversity and proving the doubters wrong. Remember, success is the best revenge, but respect is what you demand every step of the way. Drop a comment below telling me about a time you were underestimated and how you proved them wrong. I read every single one, and your stories keep me going. Never let anybody make you feel like you don't belong in the room. Sometimes you're not just supposed to be in the room, you're supposed to own it. I'll see y'all in the next video where we're diving into another story of turning adversity into victory. Until then, keep building your empire one day at a time.